Hi, and welcome to our first ever virtual summit. I'm Stephanie Wade, co-founder of ChangeNerd. And this session is brought to you by ChangeNerd Learn, where you can continuously upskill your team with certification programs, next level practices, and tools with our online learning platform. And it's also brought to you by ChangeNerd Gigs, where you can hire top freelance change management professionals to supplement your current transformation efforts. To learn more, hop onto changenerd.com. Enjoy this session.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching this segment of our virtual summit. We're connecting with Tracy Washington. She's a leadership engagement speaker, and the reason why Stephanie and I invited her to our virtual summit is because she falls in the great intersection of diversity and change management. And with everything going on in the world, talking about systemic racism is very relevant. So Tracy, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Brian, for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So before we get right into it, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I have a colorful background, like most of us do. But I started out as in corporate America, like every other person, and we've experienced as a Black woman experiencing different things, kind of climbing the corporate ladder, and went through some personal challenges that were just devastating about 15, 16 years ago, and decided I wanted to help people. I wanted to help women specifically at that time, speaking about empowerment. And that kind of just led one thing to another. It led me to grief, handling loss, and how do you navigate through that emotional impact of losing something. And then that helped me to talk intelligently to leaders about how they lead, and leading from a place of strength and not weaknesses. And I started to see that, okay, actually being vulnerable and leading from a place of weakness is a strength. And so that field just it fascinated me. So I kind of went into this deep study of leadership. I was a leader at my church, and we did a lot of ministry work under utilizing John Maxwell's material. And then just so happened, life happened, and I ended up being on the John Maxwell team. Somebody introduced me to the whole John Maxwell team. It was new at the time, so I'm like a founding member. That was, I think, 2010 or 9 or 11, somewhere around in there. And so really studied John's material about leadership and adding value to people. And it started to change my paradigm some of what makes a great leader. And leadership is about influence and developing other people. And so when you lead out of your strengths, yes, that's a good thing, but it's also, it doesn't give people permission to be who they are. And your job as a leader is to build people up and to help them elevate where they are. And so it just kind of blew my mind with leadership. So kind of like, oh, you mean you just don't tell people what to do and they go do it, and you just want to get results to people no matter what? It's like, no, that's not it. So that just really gave me this compassion for people, but also how to develop people, because I'm a people person. I'm a relationship person. So I developed this concept called relationship leadership. Awesome. And how to connect with people. So I do now, what I'm doing now in this current season is teaching organizations, especially in this moment of the Black Lives Matter and this movement and this moment of, we're talking about diversity and inclusion. That conversation is not going away anytime soon. So what I'm doing is helping leaders see the human side. How is it that not just Black and white, but let's just talk about humanity and building relationships. My experience is not the same as yours, and how do we still build a relationship with that difference? And really starting to look at the dynamics of Black-white issues, having those difficult conversations, how leaders can position themselves and create the environment that people feel open enough to have the conversation. And then what do organizations need to do to make their culture more inclusive? So that's what I'm currently doing. I do a lot of coaching with executives. I do trainings with organizations coming in with the whole mindset around change. And I'm a neuroscience junkie. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I really love studying psychology and the brain, and why do people do what they do and why don't they do what they should do. And I'm just a junkie for that. So I love to talk about, like, okay, why is it that, what are the habits that are getting us these results? And what can we do to backtrack that? So love all that type of work, and that's what I'm doing now. So
Yeah,
that's a big part of change, actually.
it
The
is,
mindset.
it is, and having
Yeah,
the ability to foster relationships in the workplace,
absolutely.
that's awesome because it does come
Key.
down to relationships, right?
Yeah,
Um,
everything.
so on the topic of systemic racism, given what's happening, well, racism has been around for for years.
Hmm.
Um, you know, how would you define systemic racism? What's a simple way to explain what systemic racism is?
I would say systemic racism is a system that is meant and designed to oppress a certain body of people,
Hmm.
knowingly or unknowingly. Most of it knowingly. Some of it, I will say, is unknowingly.
Hmm.
So uh, the big umbrella, the mortgage rates and interest rates and who's allowed in the schools, who's allowed in the neighborhoods, who can be promoted. Those are systemic issues, and many people are just now seeing that as oppression. It's like
Hmm.
it's been that way all the time. So I
Hmm.
think what we had normalized is now being labeled as systemic racism. We just didn't know that. We knew it. The people of color, I believe, knew it. We just normalized it because we always just said, well, that's the white man.
Hmm.
That's what that is, and we just normalized it, and we work hard to prove ourselves and to validate ourselves, and we just saw this as hard work. It was
Hmm.
normal for us. Hard work is normal to prove ourselves. It's okay. That's what Black women do. They prove themselves. We
Hmm.
work harder to climb the ladder, and we normalize that behavior, not realizing that there's an invisible system that was keeping us oppressed.
Yeah.
So I would say that is my definition of it. It's a system, knowing invisible or visible, that's
Yeah.
keeping a group of people
Press. Yeah.
holding them back.
Tracy, I love that you highlighted that because I think in society we have normalized things.
Hmm.
I remember going to New York as a child and visiting my grandmother in the projects.
Hmm.
And we used to, we was in the projects and we would play
Hmm.
basketball and all that good stuff or whatever. And as an adult, I was talking to my mom and dad because my mother, she had like 7, 8, siblings, right? And it's like
Hmm.
even with and with her brothers and sisters, being 17 to 23 years old, everybody's still living in the projects. Even with combined income, they had enough money to purchase a home, but the bank wouldn't give them a mortgage, right?
Mm.
And so it's normalizing in a sense that people have grew up, and just kind of accepted things, but never. I know for
Right.
myself, growing, I didn't know, right? When
Hmm.
my grandmother,
Hmm.
before she passed, and she says, "Well, Brian, make sure you get that college degree." It was just it's things just
Sure.
kind of integrated in the way we grow up, and we have normalized things. And I have friends who are Muslim, and they go through some of the same things.
Hmm. Hmm.
I was talking to a few friends during 9/11. It was hell for them getting on a
Mm.
plane,
Yes.
getting a taxi, right? And there are things that
Right.
they had to normalize. I have a friend who's Asian, went through some of the same things. So Black people have it, but other minority communities,
Right. Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we experience it differently.
Women, women,
Right.
women, women.
Yes.
It wasn't, like, when my ex-wife was pregnant and everything, we were having conversations, and she was like, well, when she had to go back to work after giving birth, she cried. And when she
Hmm.
was and I remember her telling me stories of other women in the workplace crying because because they felt like it was too early.
Right. Yep.
So,
Hmm.
it's we got to pay attention to some of these things that are happening
Right.
in society because we feel it in our
Right.
hearts. We know it's not right.
That's right. That's
No,
right. That's right.
right? We
That's
know
right.
it's not right, but at the same time, we somehow find a way to normalize it. And so I'm glad you brought that.
Yeah. And we call that strength sometimes. I do work with a lot of grieving, grief. I used to do a lot of grief recovery groups, and organizations give 3 days of bereavement leave. When there's someone significant in your life they've died or passed away, you only get 3 days to grieve, and then you got to go back to work as if nothing happened. That how much how productive are you if you are, in this space and it's like you're running to the bathroom every 10 minutes because your brain is not working right because your heart is broken. And we've dismissed the heart, like you said, something in your heart knows that this isn't right. And I think we are now being called to look at these issues where I think we've made a lot of progress since I was raising my kids and, had to leave and go back to work and all those different things. We've made a lot of progress with paternal and maternal leave and making room for adoptions and all those things. But I think when we disconnect the head from the heart, that's where we have problems.
Exactly.
Because we just, like you said, normalize behavior that shouldn't be, where a single mom has to. I know I was a single mom for many of my working years in corporate America, and I was stressed out. It was normal for me to have to run here and run there, and school called, and I had to go do this and I had to go do that. And it's like, I just did it. But there could have been something in place that my organization could have allowed for me. And I mean, we've got PTO and those type of things, but it just, if you stay home, you're going to get penalized. This is an important day. We're doing inventory, or we're, whatever it is. So I think we've come a long way, but we still got a long way to go. And I think using this moment in time to really highlight a lot of different things. We're not going to fix this in 1 year, 2 years, but I think calling attention to it is where the change starts. Having the conversations about it, and what is it where, we're, like you said, we're not the only group of marginalized people. Black people are not the only ones, but what does this look like? What can we do? And I'm glad to see some organizations taking this to heart and saying, we really want to do something. We don't want to just throw money at it, because I don't mind you writing a check for me, but I would rather see you roll up your sleeves and get dirty and figure out what this really is about. What is this really about? Because that's to me where true change and transformation happens, when you are involved and you are living in a shared experience with someone who's different from you.
I love that. I love it. What are some resources that you would recommend for people just to learn more about systemic racism?
I think there are lots of books. There are a lot of books that are written by Black authors. There are a lot of experts out there. There's a man that I was on a panel with. His name is Tim Wise, W-I-S-E. Tim is a white man who has spent his entire life studying racism, and just an expert, just his knowledge of how racism has impacted our community. And he's very real and he's very raw, and he doesn't sugarcoat anything. There are a lot of people who there are a lot of movies on, 13 is a movie that I just saw like within the last 6 months. Never saw that movie up until now. And I thought, wow, this really was an eye opener for me, because even our own people, Black people, don't know some of the things that have happened to our people that have been passed down from generation to generation. And we just think, again, it's normal. Well, it's normalized because it was normalized before. Nobody ever saw it as what it was. So I would say watch movies, watch books, follow people who are voices in this era. Not just white voices. I just used Tim Wise because I was on a panel with him, and I was just impressed by his knowledge of our culture and what Blacks and racism and systemic racism and what that looks like in the schools. And so I'd say educate yourself, watch movies, and not always going to a Black person to ask them to explain, because we were exhausted for a moment. We were exhausted trying to validate our existence. And I think most people who are people of color, especially back when all this George Floyd and Breonna Taylor murders and Ahmaud Arbery and all these things start coming to light, I think people were empathetic, but they didn't understand the totality of what that really meant for us. And so they were sorry and compassionate, but it's like, you don't understand, this is not about those murders, just about those murders. It is, but it isn't. It's a much, much bigger picture. And trying to explain that to you is exhausting. It's almost like you have to want to know and get outside of your own comfort zone to want to know what is happening. And that means being uncomfortable, and that means staying uncomfortable. because this is the moment in the movement that we're in until we see change. And I think that's the part that people are maybe unwilling to do sometimes. But I think those are, educating yourself, not somebody else educating you. Go and do your own work, and look at yourself. Did a lot of conversations with my white colleagues, whom some I love dearly, and they denounced the term white privilege. And I said, I understand that it seems offensive to you, but think of it as something that you didn't have to go through. You haven't had to experience this. So that's the privilege, is that you didn't have to go through these things. And some people embrace it and some people don't. They see it as derogatory. And I think that's just a choice that people make. But I also don't think that that gives you a permission slip to not learn and not educate yourself, because you denounce that word. I don't use it in my trainings because I just feel like it doesn't do as much good for what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work in the spaces that I'm in. But it is a thing that people are talking about, and I'm like, let's redefine it. And it's not something that's derogatory. And I always say, I hate that people use it to slander all the time. I'm like, I'm about solutions. I really am. I look for solutions. And I had to go through my own pain when this first happened, and I stayed off of social media. I had to go within myself and say, this was breaking my heart. That could have been my son.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 sons and a brother and a husband, and I have 7 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, how would I feel? And so I had to go through, process this myself before I lended a voice to it. Some people lended a voice to it right away, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. The protests, hey, I was just like, it needs to be. But for me, and where I am in my space, and I own my own space, I'm like, I've got to process this in a way. So first of all, I can process my own feelings, and then be in a position by nature of what I do for a living to be able to help other people who don't look like me. You can't learn from me if I'm attacking you every 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That just won't work. Just
Mm-hmm.
won't work.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm about to, I want to help you see what you need to see, but I won't do your work for you. But I will point out that this is something that needs attention. You can choose not to look at it, or you can choose to look at it. But here is the cost of not looking at it, because it's not going away. And I think for people who are in that space,
you're absolutely right. When things happened a couple of months ago, I wasn't prepared to bring a perspective either. I got a 12-year-old son who's like, Dad, let's talk about this, right? So I'm having conversations with him. Mm-hmm. But when it happened, I mean, fraternity brothers, college friends, other, like my neighbors, like everybody's coming together. People just start coming together, regardless of background, because people are trying to make sense of this, and
right.
The thing, when it comes to race, race is a social construct. We're all human, mm-hmm. and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And I love what you're saying around, personal accountability, because if we do take some time just to learn about systemic racism or learn about the systems of discrimination, we can be better people. Because mm-hmm. the reality of it is, there's more than enough money out here for everybody to win. There's more than enough resources out here for everybody to win. There's no, believing that, if this person gets this job, or these people get this job, is taking away resource from these people. Like that's total BS.
Right. There's See, that's an area that needs healing. That's an area right there that needs healing.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
There are some cultural beliefs within society that we have to knock down.
Right.
Truly, everybody can win. Everybody can win. Right. And we're smart enough as human beings to come up with innovative approaches so that everybody can win. So this false sense of competition, it really hurts society. So I love what you're talking about in regards to personal accountability, because I think the powers that be have put on society a false narrative, and it's unhealthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's about power. It's about identity.
It's about it's about a false sense of power. And so when a couple of years ago, I went to Ireland, and I was staying with a family. It was an Airbnb, and
Mm-hmm.
the woman was divorced, and she was an attorney. And I used to be in the Army, and her son, who was 16, he wanted to join the Army, and
Okay.
it was crazy because I'm in Ireland, so the culture's a little different and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the woman, she asked me to come down for breakfast and have a conversation, and it was in that moment that I was like, wow, regardless of background and race, like we're all humans trying to live,
Yeah.
trying to make the right
Right.
decisions, and
That's right.
she was like, look, you're in the military, he wants to join the military, tell him what
Right.
you're looking out for, right? It was just,
That's right.
we're all,
Right.
it's all human. So I love this
That's
conversation.
right. That's
I
right.
love this conversation, and that's the reason why I wanted you to like talk, because this is a very, very powerful message. The sense that we are humans. This
That's right.
building relationships. It is personal accountability, and it does
That's
start.
right.
With you. My
Connection.
yes, my co-founder.
Just connection. Connect with people.
Yeah, my co-founder Stephanie. She's big on energy. She's she's always like, Brian, where's your energy? Check yourself and find out.
Yes.
When you bring that
Yes.
positive energy into a room, people feel
Yes.
it.
That's right.
They connect with it, and so
That's right.
It'll
either attract or repel people.
Exactly.
One of the two. That's right. One of the two.
Awesome.
It'll do one of the two.
Yep. So Tracy, I want to be mindful of your time. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
having this conversation with me about systemic racism and why we need to take personal accountability. For the viewers watching this video, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Tracy, Tracy, Y, like the initial Y, my middle name, Y, Washington. And they can also find me on my website at getrelationshipcurrency.com, Get Relationship Currency. I have a free download, I believe, of a book that I wrote called Relationship Leadership, How to Strengthen Relationships to Build Trusting and Effective Teams. And I have also created a free offer for people who are in the change management, how to navigate different personalities through change. What does that look like when you've got different types of personalities? Because sometimes we make the mistake of thinking everybody is just gonna just snap to it. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Yeah. People need different things. So they can find me there, and I'm on all social media platforms. So definitely connect with me there.
Awesome. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for contributing to our virtual summit. Have a great rest of the day.
You do the same. Thanks, Brian.